Hey everyone, ready for some jaw-dropping facts about Pablo Escobar, the infamous king of cocaine? We all know he was a notorious drug lord, but did you know about his pet hippos, his DIY luxury prison, or that time he played tourist in front of the White House? Today we're counting down 10 fascinating things you probably didn't know about Pablo Escobar and his cartel. Buckle up, it's going to be a wild ride. Number 10. Humble beginnings, tombstones, diplomas, and grand theft. Pablo Escobar didn't jump straight into the billion-dollar drug biz. He started as a petty criminal. As a teenager, he was hustling wherever he could, selling fake diplomas and report cards, smuggling electronics, even stealing tombstones to resell for profit. Yep, tombstones. Talk about grave robbing. Escobar and his cousin Gustavo also dabbled in car theft and kidnapping in the early days. In fact, stealing cars got young Pablo his first arrest in 1974. These small-time crimes were the training wheels for what would become a drug empire. It's almost hard to imagine that the future cocaine kingpin once made a living peddling phony diplomas in secondhand headstones. But every legend has to start somewhere, right? Fun fact, even in his teens, Escobar had big ambitions. He reportedly told friends he wanted to be a millionaire by 22, and given his early hustle, you can see he wasn't kidding around. Number 9. The billion-dollar narco empire. It's no exaggeration to say Pablo Escobar was making obscene amounts of money. At his peak, Escobar's Medellin Cartel was pulling in an estimated $420 million per week in revenue. Let that sink in. That's around $22 billion a year from cocaine trafficking alone. By the late 1980s, he supplied as much as 80% of the world's cocaine, smuggling 15 tons of it into the U.S. each day on average. These mind-blowing numbers earned Escobar a spot on Forbes' list of the world's billionaires for 7 years straight. In 1989, Forbes listed him as the 7th richest person on the planet. Not exactly your typical CEO, huh? Escobar's net worth was estimated around $25 to $30 billion at one point, a fortune built on pure cocaine gold. With that kind of cash, he bought 142 planes and 20 helicopters to ferry product, plus yachts, cars, and homes everywhere. He basically ran his own air force and logistics network. The cartel was so wealthy it had to smuggle money back into Colombia, literally more cash than they knew what to do with. Pablo Escobar was essentially the kingpin CEO of a narcotics multinational, raking in profits that would make Fortune 500 companies jealous. Just to put it in perspective, during the 1980s, 1 out of every 5 Americans doing cocaine was essentially sending money to Escobar's operation. Wild. Number 8. Too much cash. Rats, bonfires, and rubber bands. Having billions in illegal cash creates some unique problems. Just ask Pablo Escobar. He had so much money that he stored stacks of cash in warehouses and fields, and about 10%, around $2 billion, was written off annually just due to spoilage, eaten by rats or destroyed by mold and water. Yes, rats literally chewed up millions of his dollars. Talk about money going to waste. To organize the mountains of bills, Escobar's cartel spent $2,500 a month on rubber bands alone. Imagine having a rubber band budget in the thousands. And if those examples aren't crazy enough, get this. While on the run, Escobar once burned about $2 million in cash just to keep his young daughter warm on a chilly night. That's right, he made a campfire out of money. For Escobar, money was literally fuel. Despite stashing cash in every nook and cranny, he simply couldn't spend it fast enough or launder it all. Bales of US dollars rotted away in Colombian hiding spots, and rodents had a field day nibbling on his fortune. It's an absurd illustration of how vast his wealth was. Most people worry about not having enough money. Pablo's problem was having so much that it was spoiling like old bread. It's almost cartoonish. Picture a storage room piled to the ceiling with cash, and a family of fat rats living their best life, courtesy of the Medellin Cartel's earnings. Unreal, but it really happened. Number 7. Smuggling mastermind. Submarines, tires, and crazy tricks. How do you sneak massive quantities of cocaine across continents? If you're Escobar, any way you can. The crazier, the better. His operation was extremely inventive with smuggling. Escobar's fleet included over 140 private aircraft and even a couple of mini-submarines to move product under the radar. Yes, he bought submarines, small, crude subs, to ferry cocaine under the sea into the U.S. market. Talk about a James Bond villain move. The cartel also hid drugs in plane tires. Pilots would literally pack cocaine into the airplane's wheels. Depending on how much they flew in, some pilots earned up to $500,000 per day for these runs. They stashed coke in shipments of fruit and coffee, even mixed it into cocoa powder and plastic products, then extracted it later. Nothing was off limits. Boats, cars, trucks, homemade semi-submersibles. If it could move, it could smuggle. At their peak, Escobar's smugglers were pushing up to 15 tons of cocaine out per day. The sheer scale and creativity of these operations were a secret sauce to his success. And it wasn't just transport. His crew devised stealthy routes through the jungle, bribed officials to wave shipments through, and constantly adapted. Escobar basically turned drug smuggling into an art form, an evil art, but still. Ever wonder why it took authorities so long to catch him? It's because he was always one step ahead with these wild smuggling tricks. Number 6. Private Zoo and Colombia's cocaine hippos. One of the most bizarre parts of Escobar's empire was Hacienda Nápoles, his sprawling 7,000-acre estate that was basically a personal playground. Among its many over-the-top features, luxury mansion, bull ring, private airstrip, even life-size dinosaur statues, Hacienda Nápoles had its own zoo. And we're not talking a few parrots in a cage. Escobar's zoo housed around 200 exotic animals, including elephants, giraffes, ostriches, camels, and zebras. Many were illegally imported via his drug planes, because why smuggle just cocaine when you can smuggle zebras too? Most infamous of all were the hippos. Pablo imported 4 hippopotamuses, a male and 3 females, for his zoo. After his death in 1993, the authorities relocated most of the zoo animals, but the hippos were left behind. Moving 3-ton aggressive beasts isn't easy. Well, those hippos thrived in Colombia's rivers. With no natural predators and a perfect climate, they multiplied fast. Today, there are an estimated 80 to 120 cocaine hippos roaming the wetlands, the largest wild hippo population outside of Africa. They've basically become an invasive species, causing big headaches for locals and scientists. There's an ongoing debate in Colombia about what to do with Escobar's hippos. Some experts suggest they might need to be culled to protect the ecosystem. Meanwhile, Hacienda Nápoles itself has been transformed into a theme park, because of course it has. After being looted in the turbulent years post-Escobar, the estate was eventually repurposed into a family park complete with a water park, safari attraction, and those dinosaur statues still on display. Tourists can even visit the old front gate topped by the plane Escobar used on his first U.S. drug run. So in a weird twist, the Kingpin's decadent hideaway is now a kitschy tourist destination, and his feral hippos have become unlikely Colombian celebrities. Imagine telling Escobar in the 80s that one day hippos would be part of his legacy. He'd probably laugh, but here we are. Number 5. Plata o plomo. Bribes, bullets, and brutality. Escobar had a simple philosophy when it came to dealing with authorities and enemies. Plata o plomo. In Spanish, that means silver or lead. Take the bribe or take a bullet. This catchphrase pretty much sums up how he corrupted or intimidated nearly everyone in his way. Preferably, Pablo would bribe officials, police, and politicians by literally paying them off, the plata, or silver. He poured millions into bribery, making sure that judges, generals, and local cops all had financial incentives to look the other way. However, if money didn't work, Escobar had no shame in resorting to violence, the plomo, or lead. Refuse his offer. You or your family might end up dead. It was as straightforward and terrifying as that. Escobar's enforcers made sure his orders were carried out with ruthless efficiency. He's believed to have been responsible for around 4,000 deaths in total, including police officers, judges, journalists, government officials, and rival cartel members. He ordered assassinations and bombings without hesitation. Notably, in 1989, the Medellin Cartel blew up an entire passenger airliner, Avianca Flight 203, killing about 100 people in an attempt to murder a suspected informant on board. That's the extreme level of violence we're talking about, bombing a civilian airplane to kill one target. Escobar also masterminded the bombing of a government security building, the DAS building in Bogotá, killing dozens. No tactic was off limits if it eliminated his enemies or intimidated the authorities. His private army of sicarios, hitmen, carried out kidnappings and murders on a daily basis. Escobar even put bounties on police. At one point, he openly offered cash for each cop killed, leading to the murder of hundreds of officers in Medellin. This reign of terror earned him a reputation as one of the most brutal criminals in modern history. It's jarring when you remember he could be charming and generous in other moments. But when it came to protecting his empire, Escobar truly lived by plata o plomo and left a trail of blood in his wake. In short, Escobar could offer you a suitcase of cash or have you shot, and he was totally fine with either outcome. Negotiation was not exactly a thing. Number 4. Robin Hood or villain? Pablo's public image and politics. Despite his brutality, Pablo Escobar managed to cultivate a Robin Hood image among many Colombians, especially the poor. He was born in poverty himself, and perhaps to buy goodwill and ease his conscience, he invested heavily in philanthropic projects. Escobar built schools, hospitals, housing projects, and even churches in impoverished communities. He funded food programs, constructed neighborhood soccer fields and stadiums, and generally spread cash around to those in need. In Medellin, he created an entire barrio neighborhood for families who had been living in a garbage dump, which was later nicknamed Barrio Pablo Escobar. These actions earned him the affectionate nickname El Patron, or Robin Hood, from locals who felt he was giving back to the community. And it wasn't just charity. Pablo's popularity actually propelled him into politics. Believe it or not, Escobar was elected to the Colombian Congress as an alternate member of the House of Representatives in 1982. He had political aspirations and briefly enjoyed the legitimacy and perks that came with office. In fact, this position may have even facilitated some of his drug business. For instance, he obtained a diplomatic passport, which possibly allowed him to travel to the U.S. without suspicion. However, Escobar's political career was short-lived. A prominent justice minister named Rodrigo Lara Bonilla exposed Escobar's criminal activities and questioned his wealth. The scandal forced Escobar to resign from Congress in 1984, shattering his respectable facade. Not incidentally, that justice minister who spoke out was assassinated shortly thereafter, widely believed to be ordered by Escobar. Still, during those years, many poor Colombians saw Escobar as a hero. He provided when the government didn't, so people protected him and treated him like a saint in some neighborhoods. When he was finally killed, an estimated 25,000 people attended his funeral in Medellin, including many of the poor residents whom he had helped in some way. It's a poignant paradox. For some, he was a cold-blooded villain, but for others, he was a folk hero who delivered housing and hope. Escobar expertly manipulated this Robin Hood image. It was one of the secrets to his local support and helped him hide within communities that saw him as their benefactor. It's said that at the height of his popularity, people would say, "Long live El Patron," even as the government hunted him. Talk about a split reputation. Number 3. La Catedral, the prison Pablo built and escaped. When most criminals go to prison, it's game over. But Pablo Escobar wasn't most criminals. In 1991, facing intense pressure, Escobar struck an unbelievable deal with the Colombian government. He agreed to surrender and serve time, but only if he could build his own prison on his terms. Crazy as it sounds, the authorities actually agreed, hoping to at least keep him confined. The result was La Catedral, a prison that was more like a luxury resort in the mountains. Designed and built by Escobar, La Catedral featured a nightclub, a private soccer field, a swimming pool, a waterfall, a sauna, and a casino, all for Pablo's enjoyment. It had lavish bedrooms for him and hand-picked inmate friends, a fully stocked bar, and even telephones, computers, and fax machines so he could still run his cartel from inside. Guards, handpicked by Escobar, stood outside, but essentially no police or government officials were allowed within 3 miles of the place without permission. Unsurprisingly, Escobar continued to live like a king behind bars, hosting parties with friends, family, and prostitutes, and managing his drug empire by phone. Locals jokingly called it Club Medellin or Hotel Escobar, rather than a prison. However, even this arrangement had its limits. In 1992, Escobar allegedly tortured and murdered 2 cartel members inside La Catedral over a business dispute. That was too much for the government to ignore. Faced with outrage, the authorities decided to move Escobar to a real prison. But Pablo got wind of the plan. In July 1992, about a year into his stay, Escobar simply walked out of La Catedral and vanished before the transfer could happen. Essentially, he escaped his own prison. The Colombian military surrounded the mountaintop compound, only to find that Don Pablo was already gone. The escape from La Catedral emboldened Escobar for a time. He went on the run again. But it was a huge embarrassment for the government. They had literally let the fox guard the hen house, and he flew the coop. Today, the site of La Catedral no longer houses criminals. In a poetic twist, it's been converted into a monastery run by monks, and also serves as a home for the elderly. If you visit, you can see the remnants of Pablo's playground prison, a bizarre monument to his audacity. Number 2, the final showdown, manhunt, grave over jail, and a mysterious end. Pablo Escobar's reign effectively ended on December 2nd, 1993, but the circumstances of his death remain a bit murky and mythic. After Escobar escaped La Catedral, the Colombian government, with a lot of help from the US DEA and angry rival cartels, launched a massive manhunt. A special police task force called the Search Block hunted him relentlessly, aided by a vigilante group of his enemies known as Los Pepes. They finally traced Escobar to a modest hideout in Medellin. On December 2nd, 1993, one day after his 44th birthday, Colombian forces surrounded the location. Escobar and his bodyguard tried to flee across the rooftops, resulting in a brief gunfight. Escobar was shot and killed on a rooftop, sporting a bushy mustache and a pistol in hand. Officially, the Colombian police took credit for the kill. However, there's long been speculation that Escobar took his own life rather than be captured. Escobar had always sworn he'd never be taken alive. His biggest fear was extradition to the United States. He once even said he'd rather have a grave in Colombia than a jail cell in the US. His family believes that when he realized he was cornered, he delivered the fatal shot to himself with a pistol. The bullet wound in his ear is the subject of many debates. Some of his associates and his son, Juan Pablo, now Sebastian Marroquin, suggest the scene on the rooftop was essentially suicide by cop or self-inflicted to deny his enemies the satisfaction of capturing him. We may never know for sure. What we do know is that Escobar's death marked the end of an era. The mighty king of cocaine fell at last. In the aftermath, Colombia breathed a sigh of relief, but also faced chaos as rival cartels scrambled to fill the power vacuum. Escobar's family had to flee the country. They eventually took new identities abroad. And remarkably, many in Medellin mourned him. As mentioned, roughly 25,000 people attended his funeral, a testament to the Robin Hood persona he had cultivated. To this day, Escobar's life and death are shrouded in legend, a mix of horror, admiration, and controversy. Did he go out in a final blaze of glory, or did he choose his own ending? Either way, the man who once ruled a drug empire with an iron fist was gone, and Colombia could begin healing from the narco-terror era. In classic Escobar fashion, even his death wasn't simple. It spawned a mini mystery. One last dramatic twist from Pablo, it seems. Number 1. Tourist Pablo, a family photo at the White House. Finally, perhaps the most mind-blowing Pablo Escobar tale of all, he once visited the White House as a tourist, while he was a wanted criminal. In this infamous photograph, taken around 1981, we see Pablo Escobar casually posing with his young son right in front of the White House in Washington, D.C. Yes, you read that right. The world's biggest drug lord stood on the sidewalk of 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, smiling like any other tourist, all while U.S. authorities were actively hunting his cartel. Talk about brazen. Escobar's wife actually snapped the photo of Pablo and little Juan Pablo, his son, during a family trip to the U.S. that also included Disneyland. The audacity is almost comedic. Here's the king of cocaine enjoying Mickey Mouse and American landmarks with his family, as if he were just a regular dad on vacation. How did he manage this? Well, at the time, Escobar had political cover. Remember, he was elected as an alternate congressman in Colombia in '82. He may have traveled on a diplomatic passport or possibly under a fake name. Either way, he slipped into the U.S. without drawing attention. In the photo, he's standing on Pennsylvania Avenue, back when the public could get closer to the White House fence, looking completely at ease. It's the ultimate hide-in-plain-sight moment. U.S. agents had no clue that the man snapping pics outside the president's residence was the same guy smuggling tens of thousands of kilos of coke into their country. This White House snapshot remained a little-known piece of Escobar lore until it surfaced years later, in a documentary. For many, it's the perfect symbol of Pablo Escobar's boldness and chutzpah. He literally touristed in the capital of the nation, trying to lock him up. It's almost like a dark joke he played on the world. The image also highlights how untouchable he felt at that time. Flush with cash, politically connected, and able to fly his family first class to the States for a fun outing. It's undeniably one of the most outrageous things Escobar ever pulled off that didn't involve violence. So next time you see that photo of a man and his son in front of the White House, look closely. That's not just any tourist. That's Pablo freaking Escobar, ticking an item off his bucket list while thumbing his nose at the authorities. Unbelievable, but true.